So, about 10 years ago, I was over at Andrew's parents' house. This is while we were dating, it was before we were married. And his mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and I was just standing beside one of their windows near their dining room table. And all of a sudden, there's this bird that lands outside, and I just said, without even really thinking about it, you know, I've always wanted to hold a bird in my hands. I just think that would be the sweetest thing. I'd just give anything to be able to hold a bird in my hands. And like I said, came out of my mouth without even thinking about it. We moved on, had dinner. I really gave it not another thought. And the next day, it's probably sometime in the late afternoon, I was getting ready, probably for a date with Andrew, and had my towel on my head, still had wet hair, and just putting on my mascara. and all of a sudden, my dad calls my name. Hayley, come here. I've got something I want to show you. And I was a little bit perturbed, I guess. I was on a mission to get myself ready and meet up with Andrew in time. But I was like, okay, I'll go see what he wants. And so I walk into the kitchen to see why my dad had called me in there. And he opened his hands, and inside of his hands is this gorgeous green hummingbird. And I can hardly believe my eyes. I mean, hummingbirds are so fast, and they're on the move. You're not going to catch a hummingbird unless they're about to die, practically. And so I'm assuming this bird is about to die. And I was like, how on earth did you get a hold of this bird? What's wrong with it? Is it sick or something? And he said, no, this bird was just flying around in the garage, and then all of a sudden just sat down. I think this bird just got tired. And he's like, do you want to hold it? And of course my dad had no idea what had just come out of my mouth less than 24 hours earlier. And I'm like, yes, I do want to hold this bird. And so we go outside, and he sits that tiny, gorgeous bird in my hands. And I get to I got to hold this bird for probably 5 or 10 minutes, just staring at it in awe. Nothing's wrong with this bird. And I'm seeing its tiny little eyes blink. I can see these like tiny little eyelashes, and, just like see its chest as it breathes, moving, and just all these tiny little features. I was just standing there in awe, getting to hold this bird. And as I'm sitting there in the driveway, I realize I just said this out of my mouth, just kind of mindlessly, not even 24 hours ago, that I would give anything to hold a bird, that I've always wanted to hold a bird. And for many, that would have meant nothing. But yet, the Father heard me say that. He knew the desire of my heart. And so I just sensed his bigness in that moment. He's just like, oh, you want to hold a bird? Oh, done. I'll do it for you. And not just any bird, a gorgeous green hummingbird, and nothing was wrong with this bird. And I stress that just because it's not like it was about to die. And does that even really count if you're holding a dead bird? No, this bird was fine. And it was like the fastest bird ever. It's the hummingbird. And I get to hold it and see all these features and just study its beauty in my hands for a few minutes. And then after, 5 to 10 minutes, it's like it just decided, okay, you've had your treat, you've had your bear hug from God, and just flew off all of a sudden, never to be seen again. And I just sat there in the driveway after having that experience, just encompassed by the extravagance of God, that He knows the desires of our hearts. And I'm reminded of that verse in the Psalms, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. That He's just so extravagant in His love. And I wasn't praying, I wasn't being spiritual when I said that out of my mouth about wanting to hold a bird, but it didn't matter. God is in relationship with us, and He cares about what is dear to our hearts. And for me, it spoke volumes about the things that we're praying about that we have yet to see manifest. And sometimes we feel overlooked, or like God is ignoring us, or He's forgotten that part of our lives. And in that moment, him doing this extravagant thing for me, and this was just over the top. Like, this wasn't a necessity. In the big scheme of things, does it really matter if I ever get to hold the bird or not? No. But the Father cared about it, and he made sure that it happened. And for me, it established in my heart this new level of understanding of his extravagance, that he doesn't just care about these life and death things that I'm praying for. He doesn't just want to answer the necessity prayers. He wants to just be big, and he wants me to enjoy him, and we're in relationship together, and he cares about the desires of my heart. Little Hayley in Spartanburg, South Carolina, I'm just one of billions on this planet, but he cared that I wanted to hold a bird in my hands. And he did that for me. And I share this story just to encourage you with his extravagance, that he knows those desires of your heart too. And not only does he know those little things that in the big scheme of things, our life won't end if it doesn't happen, but he knows those really big things too that we're still waiting on, and we don't know why we're still waiting on them. Why God hasn't manifested that breakthrough, or why he hasn't answered that prayer like we're waiting on, or in the way that we're hoping for. We can trust him with those things. We're going to see him move in those big ways too, but I feel like he does these extravagant things that are just over the top, and by some people's perspective, unnecessary. This is just over the top goodness on God's part. I feel like he does these things just to establish that in us, that I know you, I love you, I know the desires of your heart. Don't worry, I've got it. I know the things that you hold dear. I know the little things and the big things about you, and I love you outrageously. And so I just leave this with you, friend, so that you can just be convinced and invited into the extravagance of God, that you will experience his extravagant love for you.